Paul Rosaly. For most of us, the idea of being eaten alive is strictly the stuff of nightmares, but for wildlife filmmaker Paul Rosaly, it was just another day at the office, one that nearly turned him into snake food. In 2014, Paul Rosaly came up with the bright idea to be voluntarily swallowed by a giant green anaconda, the biggest species of snake in the world. He cooked up this scheme for a Discovery Channel special ominously titled Eaten Alive, because apparently swimming with sharks was so last season. The plan was to find a massive green anaconda in the Amazon rainforest, entice it to swallow him head first, and then extract him before he became a permanent part of the snake's diet. What could possibly go wrong? So to prepare for his anaconda appetizer role, Rosaly donned a special suit that looked like a cross between a high-tech body armor and a giant dog toy. It was designed to protect him from the snake's crushing force and highly corrosive stomach acid, because if you're going to be snake food, you might as well be indigestible. Everything went according to plan, but the anaconda, clearly not having read the script, began to constrict around Rosaly. As the snake tightened its grip, Rosaly felt his arm being crushed and unable to breathe. That's when he realized this might not have been his brightest idea. Before the anaconda could turn him into a human burrito and swallow him whole, Rosaly called for his team to rescue him. He escaped with a crushed arm and probably a healthy dose of humility. The documentary still aired, but there were mixed reviews and a fair bit of controversy. Viewers felt they were misled by the show's title, given that Rosaly wasn't eaten alive. Casey Wagner. They say lightning never strikes the same place twice, but try telling that to Casey Wagner, who survived being hit by 300 million volts of electricity twice within an hour. It all started on October 2013 when Casey Wagner was attending Rednecks with Paychecks, an off-road mud racing event held in Texas every year. On that fateful day, the sky turned pitch black and began raining heavily, so Casey took shelter at a nearby tree while waiting for a friend to return from the restroom. She probably didn't watch a lot of cartoons as a kid, because everyone who did knows that standing under a tree in a storm is a bad choice. Well, lightning struck the tree and caused a spark that made a branch fall off. But before Casey's brain could register what was happening, he instantly got struck by lightning, which paralyzed him. A natural response after you've just been high-fived by 300 million volts. However, before Casey's paralyzed body hit the ground, a second bolt of lightning struck his work boots. The bolt shot up his leg and traveled through the right side of his body and through his left arm. But he was still conscious and began shouting for help. Luckily, a nurse who was passing by at that time heard him shouting and rushed to his aid, helping him to remain conscious while she called the paramedics. The doctors who observed him at the hospital didn't find any injuries, and he was released after spending just one night at the hospital. The doctors claimed he was a living miracle, because surviving a lightning strike is rare, but Casey survived too, like he's got some insane lightning immunity. Somora. In August 2019, one man literally got himself stuck between a rock and a hard place just because he was trying to make an honest living. It started when the 21-year-old Somora set off into the Chakrai Mountains in the jungle of Cambodia to collect bat droppings so he could sell them later as fertilizer. While he was scouring for bat poop, Bora's torch decided to play hide-and-seek by falling into a small rocky hollow. As he bent down to retrieve it, he slipped faster than a politician's promises and found himself wedged between two massive rocks. Bora couldn't move his hands, legs, head, or any part of his body except for the occasional blinking of his eyes. He was stuck in this position for 4 agonizing days without food, water, and nothing to swat away the angry mosquitoes and jungle flies that treated him like an all-you-can-eat buffet. On the 3rd day, his worried parents launched a search for him, and eventually on the 4th day, his brother found him and quickly alerted the authorities. It took 1 helicopter, 200 rescue teams, and more than 10 hours of painstaking operation to free Bora. They literally had to cut away the parts of the rock that had trapped him in order to free him from his rocky predicament. Once free, he was immediately taken to a hospital in his province where he made a full recovery in less than 1 week. McKenzie. It was a clear and sunny day in August 2004 in Johannesburg, South Africa. The weather was so perfect it was practically begging for someone to jump out of a perfectly good airplane. Well, professional skydiver McKenzie was already geared up to make her 112th jump out of a plane 11,000 feet in the air. That's the height of 4 Burj Khalifa stacked on top of each other. So Christine took the plunge, descending at a speed of 160 kilometers per hour. When she was at about 3,600 feet, she deployed her main parachute, but guess what? It wouldn't open, no matter how much she tugged and pulled. She then quickly decided to cut away from the main parachute and deploy her reserve parachute, but even that opened with so much force that it caused some of the lines to snap while others got tangled. While all this was happening, Christine kept spiraling very quickly towards her death. However, in a twist of luck, 20 seconds before she hit the ground, she smashed some power line which broke the fall before she fell to the ground. Other skydivers nearby who saw Christine McKenzie bounce off the power lines quickly rushed to her, certain she was dead, but they were shocked to find out she was still breathing. An ambulance and a helicopter arrived a few minutes later, and she was airlifted to Millpack Hospital, where an X-ray scan revealed she had only suffered a fractured pelvis and other minor injuries. Despite her ordeal, McKenzie announced from her hospital bed that her accident wouldn't make her give up skydiving, because nothing says "I love life" like repeatedly jumping out of planes after nearly becoming a human lightning rod. Stephen McCormack. If you've ever seen a football, tire, or balloon getting pumped with air, then you can easily imagine what Steve McCormack went through on the 21st of May 2011. The then 48-year-old New Zealand truck driver was doing some maintenance work on his truck when he accidentally fell onto an air valve connected to a high-pressure air hose. The valve pierced his backside and began pumping air into his body, literally turning him into a human balloon, but without the fun party vibes. The pressurized air started inflating Stephen like a balloon, forcing his body to swell up very abnormally. The air was literally making his skin separate from his muscles and was spreading all the way to his abdomen, chest, lungs, and even behind his eyelids. That's right, this poor guy literally had puffy eyes in the worst way possible. Despite the intense pain and the fact that his body was literally inflating, Stephen managed to stay conscious through the ordeal till his colleagues saw what was happening and turned off the valve. Once at the hospital, doctors began the delicate and, let's be real, somewhat awkward task of deflating Stephen. The process took about 3 days and involved burping, farting, and other bodily sounds you're not meant to be doing while people are around. After surviving this real-life air pump horror show, Stephen said the whole ordeal felt like being blown up like a football. Neil Walker. One early Sunday morning in September 2019, 54-year-old Neil Walker decided it was the perfect day for a solo hike to Mount Nebo near Brisbane, Australia. As an experienced hiker, Neil packed everything he needed, except apparently common sense, because he didn't tell anyone where he was headed. Everything was going smoothly until Neil found himself near a waterfall. While climbing down the mountain, the rock beneath his foot decided it had other plans and gave way. In an instant, Neil went from conquering nature to nature conquering him. He plummeted 30 feet into a shallow creek, snapping his leg in half above the ankle and crushing his left wrist. As if the universe wasn't done teaching Neil a lesson, when he tried to pull his phone out to call for help, it slipped right into the water. It was at this point that Neil realized he could neither call for help nor expect to be searched for. So, with his leg looking like it lost a fight with a wrecking ball and his wrist out of commission, Neil had only one option: to become his own rescue team. He used his hiking poles and his shirt to splint his fractured leg and began crawling, stopping from time to time to rest and eat. When he didn't show up at work the next day and neighbors confirmed they had not seen him, a massive search was organized to find Neil Walker. Fortunately for Walker, he was found 2 days later on the verge of death. He was quickly administered first aid, given food and water, then taken to a hospital. Caleb Whitby. If you've ever been stuck in traffic, you know how soul-crushing it can be. Now, imagine that, but cranked up to a level that would give your nightmares nightmares. That's exactly what Caleb Whitby found himself in on a foggy January morning in 2015. Caleb was cruising down Interstate 84 in Oregon when the road turned into an ice rink, slicker than a greased pig at a county fair, thanks to some nasty freezing rain. His truck started sliding, and before he could even stomp on the brakes, he collided with the back of a semi-truck. While he was was processing what had just happened, another semi-truck came barreling through the fog, slamming into his vehicle. In a twist of fate that would make a contortionist jealous, Caleb's truck was crushed and folded around him like a metallic cocoon. He was pinned between the two semi-trucks in a space so tight you couldn't slip a credit card through it. Talk about being caught between a truck and a hard place. Miraculously, Caleb remained conscious throughout the ordeal. As he sat there, practically gift-wrapped in his own vehicle, he could hear the sounds of a massive pileup continuing around him. Over 100 vehicles would eventually be involved in this real-life bumper car nightmare. For 30 nail-biting minutes, Caleb waited in his four-wheeled sardine can, probably contemplating whether he should have just stayed in bed that morning. When rescue workers finally got to him, they were shocked to discover that he was not only alive, but had nothing more than a few scratches and a bruised eyebrow. It was as if the laws of physics had taken a coffee break just for Caleb. He walked away from an accident that should have put him 6 feet deep. Forthman Murph. It's afternoon of the summer in 1984, and 74-year-old Forthman Murph was busy doing what he had been doing his whole life, chopping down trees. But on this particular day, nature decided it had had enough of Forthman's lumberjack legacy. He was on a 100-foot-tall tree trimming the branch when a decaying branch from around 80 feet up decided to make a surprise visit on Murph's head and knocked him unconscious into a ditch below. While lying there half dead, the branch he was cutting earlier also broke off and landed on his feet. It was like the tree was really committed to putting Forthman out of business. Murph eventually woke up 20 minutes later to the buzzing sound of his still-running chainsaw, which had already started slicing his neck. He yanked the saw off, pulls his feet out from under the fallen branch, and leaps to his truck holding his head in place. What's even crazier is that the professional lumberjack doesn't even call an ambulance. He drives himself to a neighbor's house, who then drives Murph to another hospital to have his head quite literally reattached. Surprisingly, he survived. Not only did Forthman Murph live through this chainsaw massacre, but he went on to live another 18 years, and in true Forthman style, he continued chopping down trees until he passed away at the grand old age of 92. Because apparently, even death had to wait until Forthman was done with his to-do list. Todd Orr. Alright, so picture your worst camping trip. Maybe it rained the whole time, or you forgot to pack the snacks. Now, crank that up to 11, sprinkle in some nightmare fuel, and you've got the faintest idea of the ordeal Todd Orr went through on September 30th, 2016. Todd was hiking through Madison Valley in rural Montana in search of deer when he stumbled across a grizzly bear and her cubs. Before he could register the danger he was in, Mama Grizzly charged towards him in a flurry of teeth and claws. Todd, thinking fast, whipped out his trusty bear spray, but it turns out the bear wasn't in the mood for seasoning. She was on top of him before he could even blink, biting and scratching like she was auditioning for grizzly MMA. But just as quickly as the animal landed her attacks, she wandered off into the forest. Todd, somehow still alive, dragged himself to his feet and walked 3 miles back to his car. But before he could make his getaway, the bear emerged from behind for round 2. At this point, Todd knew he'd become dinner for the grizzly if he didn't act fast. So Todd dropped to the ground, covered his neck and head with his hands, and played dead as the bear trampled and mauled him mercilessly. Seeing no signs of life, the bear left. Todd stood up once more and managed to drive himself to the hospital, where doctors spent 5 hours stitching him up, followed by 8 months of rehab. People go through the worst ordeals every day and miraculously survive it at times. If you want to find out more about these exciting stories, then join our Discord server today. Natalia Pasta. It's afternoon in the spring of May 2015, and 54-year-old Natalia Pasta, with her 80-year-old friend Valentina, were with their dog gathering wood in a Russian forest when they unknowingly crossed the path of a 220-pound female brown bear. The bear immediately attacked the dog once it started barking, and for some crazy reason, the two women tried to defend their dog by hitting the bear with a frickin' stick. Yep, that's right, they attacked a full-grown bear with a stick. Well, of course, the bear wasn't too thrilled and decided to take its frustration out on Natalia. And what did her 80-year-old friend Valentina do? She pulled a classic nope and bolted for help, leaving poor Natalia to face the jaws of death solo. And honestly, there isn't much she could do other than run as fast as her 80-year-old legs have never run before. The bear used its long claws caused to scratch and tear Natalia's skin and even fractured the bones in her hand. However, Natalia was smart. She pretended to be dead and lay on the ground perfectly still. The bear, thinking she was dead, stopped attacking her. And in no hurry for a snack, the bear began burying her with sand and leaves as if it was hiding some leftover lasagna. After what seemed like a long hour ordeal, Valentina eventually arrived with rescuers who shot the bear and rescued Natalia. She was airlifted with a helicopter to a nearby hospital where she made a full recovery.